Welcome to Everything's Not Black and White with your hosts, Lala and Brian.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's episode. We are so excited to share our next guest with all of you. As you know, we love to have really interesting people come to our podcast to really share their story and open up our minds about things we may not have ever experienced before. And today's guest is no exception. I absolutely got to meet her beautiful daughter through another friend of ours. And when I just fell in love with her, I knew she had to come from a good stock. And that's what they say. And it's really true. So I am super excited to welcome to the EMBW podcast, Dr. Leslie Ahmadi. How are you, darling?
I am great. I'm happy to be here.
We are so excited to have you here. So thank you for choosing to tell your story here for our guests. So let's just kind of go back a little bit to the beginning. Can you tell people a little bit, like, where were you born? How'd you grow up? Those kind of wonderful things to get them settled into who you are.
I am originally from New England. So I straddle two regions of the United States in terms of growing up. One is New England, the Boston, Hartford area, between those two areas, and Ohio, because my mom is from the Cleveland area. And also because I ended up going to Ohio State and ended up settling in Columbus, Ohio. I was born of two Black American parents. I had and still have two sisters, and that's my background.
I love it. So where do you fall in the birth order for your sisters?
Can you guess?
You the baby? I hope so, because I'm the baby. I love being the baby. Listen, I love being the baby.
And just to clarify for Ohio State fans out there, we do understand it. It's the Ohio State University.
Stand corrected. I should know better. Yes, the Ohio State University. Very proud to be an alumna of there. So where were we?
The birth order.
I am the middle child.
Ooh, middle child. See, I don't know what it's like to be a middle child. My sister tells me about being the oldest and I'm the baby, even though I grew up with a lot of my cousins. So I kind of was a middle child in one point. I was the youngest of the oldest cousins and the oldest of the youngest cousins. So I was kind of a middle child, but I still got my way. So I'm still the baby. I like that.
Yeah, that would be good.
I love that so much. So growing up in New England, which I think might be interesting as a Black American, you know, obviously I grew up in the South, so I know there was a very different experience growing up as a Black American in the South in the 70s and 80s. And so I'm curious, how was the experience in New England being Black in that time?
From what I had understood, because I had not been in the South up at that particular time, there were attitudes. There were attitudes, but they were more subtle. I'm talking about racist, perhaps unconscious racism that I came across. The little things, the little comments, the microaggressions.
Sure.
Not something I focused on, but it was there.
Yeah, for sure. So I think it's really an interesting perspective, you know, with some of the microaggressions, you know, from my husband and I, obviously being in an interracial relationship, we hear them even to this day sometimes that people just don't understand or approve of us being married and being together. But you also are a part of an interracial relationship. Can we talk about that a little bit?
Yes, sure. When I attended the Ohio State University, I happened to meet on my floor a gentleman who, he was from Iran. Because he was here to study for his Ph.D. Very kind gentleman, fine, fun. And most of all, he was going back to Iran. That was his goal, to help his people. So I felt I was safe with him. There was not going to be any romance. He was too nice not to be a friend with, but it took out complications that we were not going to have anything romantic. Wrong. He was so delightful, and I kind of fell in love with him within about the space of 3 weeks. This is interesting because, you know, I think in the back of my mind, I had always, from the time I think I was 3 or 4, I wanted to get married. And I had this ideal that developed. I thought I was going to marry a a Black Christian man, because that reflected my experience, my appearance, my ideals. And so to fall in love with this man from Iran was a surprise to me as much as it was to anyone else, if anyone else was surprised.
Yeah.
That was the start of a love story. It was ended up not only being interracial, but intercultural and interfaith.
Wow.
Mm-hmm.
So let me ask this question first. With your family, and you tell them, hello, I didn't plan this, but now I've fallen in love with this man. And he's not the Black Christian man that you thought he was going to be. He's now this Iranian Muslim man. So how did they react? How did your family react?
Okay, I'm going to go down the list. My father, it took me a while to gather up the courage to tell my dad, even though I was 30 or 32 years old at the time, old enough to not be afraid, but I was intimidated to tell my dad. And we were almost sure we were going to get married. But anyway, when we went to Connecticut to visit my dad and introduce Mahmoud for the first time, I guess we hadn't told him yet, but I think it was in his bones, because there was immediate tension between the two men. And there was a kind of a confrontation. I don't know. It was a necessary thing. And of course, we all know that you don't have to have an Iranian boyfriend to have this happen with your father, right?
Facts. Those are real facts.
This is universal. But it was a different flavor, because Mahmoud showed some of his own gallantry and his own brand. And they ended up, all I can say is that by the end of the night, something had happened and the two men were connected.
Oh,
yeah.
I love that.
Yeah.
I love that.
It was really special. So my father said to me, Leslie, I don't know what I expected, but he's a really lovely man. And if you marry him, I'm going to disown you.
Oh, no. Oh my goodness.
This is father protectiveness.
Yes.
He did not want me to go to Iran. And as we all know, well, back then as now, and back then I mean in the 80s.
Oh, yeah.
In the 80s, we were just coming off of the Iranian Revolution, the Islamic Revolution. There was the hostage crisis that was going on. And not only that, but there was a book, a best-selling book. I don't know if you've heard of it, Not Without My Daughter.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Sally Field was in that movie, right?
Yes,
Yeah.
there's a book and a film made after it. And it's the story, it's a memoir, and it's a story of a white American woman who was married to an Iranian doctor. They lived in the United States. He had a successful practice. One day they had a little girl who was 5 years old. He asked her to come with him on vacation to Iran to meet his family and just to spend a couple of weeks. And once they were there, he said, you know what? At close to the end of the 2 weeks, we're not going back. And it's the story of the hell that she felt she experienced.
Yeah.
With that in the air, it seems like it became a bestseller and it became a book, and it seemed to just hit a raw nerve in the American consciousness.
Sure.
Here is a place where being Black American was actually something that was in our favor, because I knew, we know as Black Americans that people can, they can look at us through the eyes of prejudice, bias, things that are unconscious in the air. And so I knew that couldn't be so. But anyway, that was in the consciousness of my family too.
Sure.
And a little bit in me too.
Yeah, for sure.
Which is hard to admit as a Black American, but I both was against it, but affected by it.
Yeah.
So anyway, so that was my father. My aunt Anise, my father's favorite sister, fell in love with Mahmoud. I hope you'll meet him sometime.
I hope so too.
Yeah, he's sweet, he's funny, he's smart, he's humble, and she liked him, and he was a gentleman. So what was there not to like? we spent a wonderful few days with her, and she was my glamorous aunt from New York City. But anyway, when we said goodbye, I got a package in the mail a few days later. Guess what it was? Not Without My Daughter.
No
the
way.
Copy of the book.
You want to make sure you read it
Yeah,
before you go over.
Yeah. I thought, Annalise, you didn't do that. Yes, she did with the best of intentions. So she also was tormented and struggling with this. Our my two sisters loved Mahmoud. He was the brother that we had never had. We were three girls. Yeah. And finally, my mom, who had already passed away, I knew in my heart that she would have loved him. I could imagine her saying to me, "What are you waiting for? You have always said you love the world and exploring the world and other cultures and other languages. He's a gentleman and he doesn't play games. What person from your own country can you find like that?"
Yeah.
And so I heard that and I responded.
I love that. So you get the blessings finally from your family, reluctantly in some cases, but you get it.
Yeah.
And then you all get married.
Yes.
And then you move to Iran.
Yes, we did. We married in 1988, and in 1991, Mahmoud went over and accepted a university position, and I followed him a few months later. Parisa was our daughter, our firstborn, was just about 1 year old. And
So what was that experience like for you? Like, I assumed you read the book after your aunt sent it to you. So you have the book. So you're now in Iran and you have your beautiful daughter. And what are you feeling? Tell me what you were feeling when you were there.
It's really what happened before I went to Iran that is memorable for me, impactful. Because I had a fear. One of the things I had always imagined in my life, metaphorically, was to be a flamenco dancer, to be free, to be feminine, to be sensual, if you will, to express my femininity in a joyful way. And I felt that was going to be taken away when I went to Iran, that kind of personal freedom. But I wasn't supposed to feel that way. As a Black American who knew how it felt to be viewed through the eyes of prejudice, as a person who taught language and culture at the university, I felt I had no right to have this secret dread. So I didn't tell anyone. And so how did it express itself? The fear didn't go away. I began to have dreams of floating figures, ghost-like figures, cloth filling the air. What did it represent for me? It represented what in Persian we call, or is called chador, the cover that many women wear. It is mandated with it. Yeah, it still is. It is mandated for women to have their head and body covered, and that's the way that the particular government interpreted how one should be covered. I just dreaded being obliged to wear that, and so I went with that dread. When I went to Iran, my first vision was to see the members of my husband's family waiting for us at the airport. They were smiling. They had flowers. There were 19 or 20 of them. The women at that time all were wearing the quote-unquote dreaded chador. But it wasn't long before I, being in their company, began to see less and less the dreaded quote-unquote chador and more of those warm, kind, loving, friendly faces. I will say, and I came to learn too, that some of my sisters-in-law wore the chador out of a cultural tradition, not because they felt forced to do so. And there was just much, that was just the tip of the iceberg of things I was going to come to learn and understand about the Iranian culture and how you would view things. So that's an example of a quotation that's very special to me, passed on to me by my sister Sylvia years before I was going to meet Mahmoud and know that we were going to be together. And that quotation comes from Marcel Proust, the French writer, who said, "The real voyage of discovery lies not in seeking new landscapes, but in having new eyes."
Yeah, I love that. And so it feels like your eyes were definitely opened, you know. So even with the dream, I always, you know, people tease about people being woke now in this generation, but there was an awakening for you. And it's a beautiful awakening,
Yes.
right? That opened you up to a new adventure that you might not have had before if you chose to keep your eyes closed. So I love
Yes.
that you were able to see through new eyes.
Me too.
Yeah, that's really beautiful.
Otherwise, I would have missed so much.
Yes. So looking back now, thinking about, because you spent 4 years in Iran, right?
Yes.
So what was it that you feel like is some of the biggest lessons that you brought back with you when you think about that time that you spent there with your husband and his family?
We talked a little bit about the issue of faith. And one of the things I learned that some of our viewers or listeners may know and others may not know, I did not know at the time, at the beginning, before I met Mahmoud, that in Islam, the faith of Islam is really the same, has the same roots as the Christian faith and the Jewish faith. So it was very interesting to me that some of the assumptions that people have about hostility between Christians and Muslims is distorted. They speak of the God of Abraham and Moses and David and Jesus as the same God. And my point is that I was embraced for both the similarities and the differences of my faith. I have to say, one of my favorite stories is when my husband first came back from Iran. He first visited Iran 12 years after he had left. We had been married for 1 year, and he brought back a gift for me from his father and mother for me. What was it? It was a beautiful gold pendant. That was a tradition for in-laws to give to their husband's bride. I brought it. I wore it today.
Oh, I love it.
And it on the image, on the face of the image, it was G-O-D, God. And I thought, thank you. What does it mean? I wasn't sure how to interpret the message that might be implied. Was it welcome to our world of faith and you are welcome to convert? Was it something else? I just didn't know. But then I remembered a story that my husband had told me before we had gotten married and I first shared my faith with him. I told him what Christ meant to me personally in my faith journey. And he listened carefully without looking like he was ready to jump in and tell me how I was wrong. Instead, he just said, you mean Jesus, right? I said, yes. And he said, well, we like him too. But maybe we don't like him quite as much as you guys do.
That is awesome. I love that so much.
It was just so disarming, like it is for you. If that was how it was, what do you say to something like that?
Right.
You know, and it taught me something. But I'll pause and fast forward back to this pendant. And, you know, Lala, when I took a look at it, the light hit it in a different way. And on it, I don't know if you can see it, But underneath the G-O-D is the image of a cross.
I can see that. That's beautiful.
What did that say to me? That they loved and accepted me and all of me, including all my faith, without an agenda to change me. And that was one of the greatest gifts and lessons that I had, because in Iran, the tables were turned and I was suddenly the religious minority.
Yeah.
And I wondered what it would have been like to be continuously preached to change my faith.
Sure.
That never happened. There were a couple people I met along the way who, made some suggestions to that effect, but it was never in any of my family. And my father-in-law and mother-in-law were very devout Muslims, and that was part of their expression of faith. And I have come to really love and respect my Muslim brothers and sisters.
I love that. I think that's so powerful, because I think about where we are even now as a nation. We're so divided on so many things. And I think, part of that religious division is huge here.
Yes.
It's very, very big, and I love that you felt the inclusion of just being yourself.
Yes.
And it's so important for people to feel that. And I would love to have your thoughts after, your experiences. What can we do? How can we become better as a nation to be able to be more accepting for people and not try to change them, but truly accept them as they are?
I think the first thing is to want to understand. I mean, this reminds me of something when I asked Baba, my father-in-law. We had many conversations. He had a very literary sounding Persian, so I had to listen really hard to get what he was trying to say. But I remember asking him one day, what is the secret, Baba? Our countries are not getting along, and they haven't for a long time. What is the secret for getting along? And he said, Miss Leslie, which is another thing that reminded me of African-American tradition. They all called me Miss Leslie. Miss Leslie, the secret to really making things work in a relationship between people or peoples is to really want it.
That's a mic drop right there. Baba was talking about the real stuff right there, honey.
Yes,
That's real talk.
That was real talk. And so that goes back to what I was saying about being willing and interested in understanding, because we carry a lot of assumptions. We carry a lot of biases that were passed on to us.
Yes, we do.
And I think it starts with trying to let go of those assumptions and listen to the other voice that's in front of you, the other person who's in front of you, the other group that's in front of you. It starts with just understanding and being willing to hear things from the other person's point of view.
Yeah.
Back to the quotation of developing new eyes.
Yeah.
That family was a master at doing that, and it helped me to do the same.
I love that so much. So you have an upcoming book that is going to be released next year. Tell us a little bit what the book is about.
The title, and thank you so much for mentioning it, the title of the book is Road Between Two Hearts. A Black American Bride Discovers Iran. The title is based on an expression used in Persian that is translated as, a road can always be found between two hearts. And I put in parentheses, if you want to, if you really want to.
If you really want to.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so it's the story of me, a Black American Christian woman who is too ashamed to admit that she's terrified to go to Iran, to start a new life with her Iranian husband. That's what the story is about.
I love it.
That interfaith, intercultural, and interracial journey.
I love that. And I think it's timely. We need that story in this day and age, so much so to give people hope that you've transcended so many challenges that could have been in your way. And your love, that road between those two hearts, really was strong. And you have beautiful children because of it. and you have a beautiful life because of it. And now this story gets to be told and somebody else gets to feel that encouragement from you. So I'm very excited about that.
Well, one of the reasons I'm so excited to be on your broadcast is I love the name of your podcast. Everything's not black and white. And that was part of my journey for sure, too.
Yeah,
Thanks,
I love that.
Thanks for the plug.
I love that. So we know the book's going to come out next in spring, but like, how can people, if they want to follow your story along and get to know you and stay connected with you, how can they do that?
I have a website, an author website, and you can find it under leslieahmadi.com.
leslieahmadi.com, and we're going to put that in our show notes so you all can follow suit. And can they sign up to get notifications and all the things?
Yes. If you get to that homepage, it will invite you to sign up for notifications and updates, which will include cultural reflections as well. It focuses on the things that have stayed with me since I've come back to the United States that have been influenced by Iran and Iranian culture. But it will also include updates on where we are with the book, which is anticipated to be published in the spring of next year.
I love that.
Sounds exciting.
I know. Well, we'll definitely have to have a little book launch party and invite our listeners to be a part of that. So we would love that so much.
That would be great.
That is so wonderful. What is one thing you want to leave our listeners with? Something that you feel like you want them to know, not only just about you, but maybe about themselves, something that you learned about yourself that you would like to share with them.
Yes, there's another quotation that comes to mind, and that is written, I think, a quote by Anais Nim. And the quotation is, "We don't see things as they are. We see things as we are."
Mm-hmm.
And oh my goodness, I learned that lesson over and over again. The cultural educator learned that over and over again when I was in Iran, and I continue to learn that. So there's no shame in that. It's just being aware that we need to watch our assumptions, look to ourselves and see where we are in a way that might impact the way we see something incorrectly.
Mm-hmm.
And go to the source and find out.
Exactly. Don't just assume.
Yeah.
Ask the right questions.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I love it. Dr. Miss Leslie, all the things that you are, thank you for being here. Thank you for sharing your voice and your story. There's so many people that I know will be deeply touched by what you've been through and what you continue to share, and that is pure love. And I see it and I feel it, and I'm so excited that our listeners get to hear it too. So thank you for being here today.
Thank you, Lala, and thank you, Brian.
Yes, ma'am.
So Brian, if people want to get in touch with us, how do they do that?
Great question. You can email us at embwpodcast@gmail.com, or you can follow us on Facebook.
That's right. So that is our show for today. Thank you again, Dr. Leslie Ahmadi.
Thank you.
And for being here and sharing your story and for giving birth to an amazing human being that I love so much. Thank you to everybody for listening. We'll see you next time. Bye.
Bye.